Recording now. Warm welcome everyone to the meeting today. Sorry that it's been some problems.
So we are recording the audio version of this meeting, which will be put on our website as soon as possible. Continue to make attempts to broadcast the meeting. So without further ado, this board meeting. We did resolve to go into in-committee prior to this meeting. You're now in office. I'd like to welcome everybody, and I'm asking now if there are any. I've got no.
Hi Fiona, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, so audio isn't broken on here. I've sent an invitation to Chris. He says it just keeps reverting back to the login screen. So something's happened in the room, it appears.
Okay. Is the meeting still going ahead in the room, in the real room?
I'll check with Amy.
Because I can't see any settings that are different. This is an ongoing link. I'm just trying to work out why it would work for us.
It's still going ahead. I got Shan right into me. Oh, it's the rebooting the screen.
Okay. So I can still see Hugh in here twice, even though he said he's only in there once. So some kind of disconnect between what I'm seeing and what's happening.
So my thought is if we can get the room in just as an all participant, we can then, can we click on them and change them to a panelist if that's what's needed?
Yes, you can try that.
So I went into participants, I went to copy invite link, and I sent that to Chris, who's in the room now trying to get us on.
I couldn't get on the public link though. I had to come in as my panelist because I usually go in as a public link, and it was so I couldn't join.
Right,
And
okay.
Fiona sent me all the full list and it wouldn't let me in, so I'm on a panelist link. Usually I come in on the public link so I can make sure that it's all working for the public, and I couldn't get in.
And it's the same public link we've always used.
So what happens
Yeah,
when you,
it's the one we've used every time. Yeah.
So when you say used every time, how long has this been used for, Fiona? How far back?
Maybe a few months.
Okay. Didn't Ricky get involved around the public link because it went out and it had different permissions? So there was a new public link.
I wasn't aware of that.
Right. I'll check with him. But there was something around the link was shared on Twitter, and it had some kind of joining code or something in the link. So that was changed at some point. But when I go copy link invite, Helen, if I send you something on Teams, can you try clicking that and see if you can get back in? Thank you. I'll do that right now.
I'll log out and I'll go back in.
Thank you. Hi, Hugh. Can you try talking for me? I'm changing the channels from Cymru. I'm back. I'm just changing the channels now to Hugh translation. I'm not hearing Hugh. Oh, look, attendees, Helen Cade, there we are. Hi, Helen. Helen, can you hear us? There you go. So Helen's on with that link, which is really good. Fiona, can you see if you can change Helen into a panelist from the attendees list?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Oh, I think she left.
I know, I've
Well, there we
just
are. Hi,
changed
Helen.
that, yeah.
Can you hear us? You're on mute at the moment.
I'm
There we
in.
go. There we are. So you went through that link, and then I think you were upgraded then by Fiona.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get the room in via that method. So
Yeah.
that link worked. Just let Chris know. So
Yeah. You have to put the passcode in, make sure
Yeah,
he
of course.
knows.
right. There's some from HEIW is on site as well. They're going down to help Chris as well. No way, he's on his own trying to sort this out with the board staring at him.
Thanks, Jay.
No problem.
Is there anything I can do from my side?
I don't think so. It's just waiting for the room now to get in. So we've got Chris there in front of the screen. I've sent the link to the actual screen, so we can just click the link on the screen and hopefully boot up. There you go. There's the room.
Yes, broadcast. Understated. Diolch am hynny.
Do that in Welsh?
Croeso gynnes iawn pawb. I am really sorry, but we've had technical issues so far. We're in the middle of the chair's report. We've received the minutes of the last meeting, and we've made an audio recording. Should you want to go back and listen to that, but you're very welcome for those of you who are watching on Zoom. In terms of the board matters, our advert for an independent member is now live, and I'd like to ask everybody here to actually connect up with all the people that they know who might be interested and would be of benefit to becoming a board member at HEIW. I think that the board has worked really in a very busy way. We've actually been having special briefing sessions so we can get down into some of the detail, but also influence some of the thinking in the papers coming forward. And I'm very grateful to the exec team and the people who've organised these sessions. It's been really interesting, and particularly the pharmacy and the performance report presentation. And of course, we had a session on the digital strategy, which is in today's agenda. So that's all I've got to say, really. It's a very complex time. It is very busy. And I think we need all to be focused on giving good quality patient care through good education and training. Thank you very much. Can I ask that there were no, by the way, chair's actions in over the last few months, I'm pleased to say. So can I hand over now to Alex as Chief Exec for your report, Alex?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to really add anything to the report that I've submitted, other than to note the mistake that's on the duty of quality and candour, which obviously comes into force on the 1st of April 2023, not 2020, so apologies for that. Yeah. But I'm happy to take any questions on any of the other content.
Chair, can I ask, in terms of the education and training that's now been approved by the Minister, in terms of our robust implementation plan that's noted within your report, are you able to give the board some detail in terms of timelines for that implementation plan?
I think, John, the plan is to bring that to the next Education Committee, so that the committee can see how we've broken down those numbers into different chunks of activity and timelines. So I can't give you a detailed answer now, but that work is in progress. Martin Riley from Lisa's team is leading that, because obviously the main risks relate to the health professional programmes.
When is the next Education Committee?
I can give assurance that the work is already underway in progressing, so that work is well and true.
Is that okay, John? Any other questions for Alex? Okay, thank you very much, Alex. I'm going now to section 3, strategic matters, and the first matter is the proposed approval of the digital and data strategy. Sian.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just finding my paper. Yeah, so the overarching paper provides a
an overview of how the strategy was developed. So it's been done in collaboration with many people across HEIW, with the Digital Transformation Leadership Group, the deputies and deans, the executive team, and we also held a board development session. So thank you to all of you that contributed in shaping the strategy. The feedback from that engagement is available in Appendix 1, and it shows how we've either taken on board the feedback or some of that maybe was already included in previous drafts. The paper describes then the overview of the strategy, which describes how the digital vision that enables us to deliver our corporate vision of transforming the workforce for a healthier Wales. It's split across 5 missions, and I actually see those 5 missions being consistent over this period and probably further periods, and then it details the priorities and the things that we will concentrate on as a digital and data team and the organisation more broadly during the 5-year period of the strategy. Associated with those then, each of the missions have a number of objectives supported with implementation plans, and we will align that to our IMTP processes and measure then quarterly achievables and that we are achieving the overall vision. The strategy describes an internal and an external focus for HEIW and describes the different focuses that we'll have in those areas. It does detail a governance and risk of how we will monitor that, and we also note that internal audit will be asked to consider the strategy in their work plan for next year. We will also be considering, as on the agenda, the role of the duty of candour and governance within the strategy and taking that into consideration. At the moment, the paper doesn't provide any financial implications of the strategy. However, we do recognise that further business cases will be required. And one of those risks is connected to the labour market and the difficulty that we may consider in getting in resources to fund it. So that is something we're very aware of and taking action already to try and address, but that is an area that we'll watch very closely. So I hope that the board can see from the development of the board development session we had to the actual delivery of the strategy that some of your comments have been included, and that it's a useful document that sets out our direction for the next 5 years, and hopefully that you can approve the strategy today. And obviously if there's any room for small changes or substantial changes, we can make those offline.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Sean. And a huge amount of work's gone into getting this to the point it's at, and well done to the team. Come from a standing start, so it's a completely new document. So it was really, really good to see. I only had a couple of questions, and it's more about this issue about our partners and who does what, I guess. In terms of the actual strategy itself, on page 5 it says outer scope is the development of the digital professional workforce. So I understand that for most of them, but what about yourself, your team, the health boards, etc.? So that was my first question. Shall I just run through them quickly? And then it's the same sort of issue in terms of training. On page 7, we talk about getting the workforce digitally savvy, for want of a better word, etc., etc. Is HEIW the only place for this learning, or is there a risk of duplication, I guess, and even contradiction in terms of some of it, in terms of our partners? And just one last throwaway, can you just bring the RPA bit alive a little bit and give some examples of where you think that might be appropriate?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, working with partners in the digital profession, DHEW is the lead for that development of the digital profession. And on the new appointed CDO, which is Mike Emery, also has that as a professional responsibility as the professional lead for the digital profession. However, that does not take away from my responsibility as the Director of Digital to develop our own teams And so that would be about the team's development and making sure that we've got the skills to deliver the plan and aligning that to PADRs and gaps that we have. So no, that is still definitely a responsibility for our own internal teams as part of good governance for team management. In relation to the digital capabilities and making sure, as you put it, that everyone's digitally savvy, we're doing that in partnership. So we are the lead organisation for that, but I am regularly reporting feedback on that to the peer group of the digital directors. And actually, once we have a product in Q4 to go live, we are putting an implementation group and making sure that everyone locally is using that. Also, we are engaging with social care around some cross working in that space as well. It's likely that many of the local authorities will be purchasing the same learning management software as we've got. So there's opportunity and already early conversations about us sharing some of this across boundaries as well. So yeah, we are trying to make sure that we're covering and not duplicating.
Oh, Ruth, Alex, and then Tina.
There are a lot of reasons why this almost feels inevitable. We have to make this great leap forward. But if you turn to section 7 on the benefits, value, and investment, there's a sort of salutary sense to that we need to go into this eyes wide open, because whilst just to say what it says, digital transformation is critical to success, but the transformation isn't simple. The return on investment is potentially quite difficult to demonstrate. And the list, as it stands, is a list of really positive potential outcomes. You don't get a sense of value out of it. And I just wonder whether we need to be possibly moving this up to the front and making it a bit more of a feature as a context for this, great step forward, if we take it.
Yeah, okay. We can look at that from a formatting point of view, and I think whilst that's almost like the framework that we're going to use to evaluate, and I think what you're asking for is maybe the impact, the punch, the so what part of the question, and I think each of the individual objectives we will look to use that benefits framework to really quantify them as they come through. So one of the first ones will be digital capability skill, and it's about demonstrating the value and the return on investment from that perspective. So yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Well, there's a huge amount of work in there.
Okay, thank you.
Tina.
I really enjoyed reading this, and there's some really excellent ways of working forward. It's quite exciting. I also picked up on your point, so we're obviously sharing the same thing now, because I'd highlighted that to say the only thing that I wondered, Sian, was whether or not we should comment on the impact of the duty and care and quality legislation that's coming in going forward, so that we can future-proof this, because there's a section within that which talks about data information and that kind of stuff, which you're compliant with here, but just to acknowledge that we've actually addressed that. Thanks.
I've got Jonathan, then John.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I just say I think the strategy works and reads incredibly well. I think it makes a compelling case, and my comment, literally rather my suggestion, is going to be very much in line with Ruth's around section 7. I think that it does make that compelling case for why this is needed and what this does and the value that it brings. And I can see why it's there, because it allows you to set out how we're going to judge the sorts of impact that we believe the strategy will bring. But I think it makes such a strong case trying to capture that towards the front. I think for the reader, we'll just get a sense of that, the why. So yeah, absolutely, I'm with Dr. H on this.
John.
Thank you, Chair. I would echo the comments of my colleagues with regards to the strategy. It's welcomed. I thought it was an absolute pleasure to read, and that's from somebody who knows nothing about digital whatsoever. I could understand it.
Yeah.
Which is the test. So So I certainly applaud the work that's been done. Some considerations, if I may. One of them is around governance. I note your 3 pillars of governance. They're all internal from what I can see. What are the proposals to ensure that we as a board gain assurance that we're delivering to time and we're monitoring that? And how will that come back to board in terms of the overall structure of governance? The other point to note is the 5 statements and the objectives associated with those. Some of them are predicated on partners and us being able to deliver with partners. So again, how are we going to manage that to ensure that we are delivering when we're working collaboratively? And lastly, how are we considering the resource implications of the strategy?
In relation to the governance and bringing things back to the board, I imagine that we will be reporting formally back on progress on the forward walk plan and bringing sort of status updates to the board on this topic. And there's a discussion whether that goes through audit and assurance committee in the first instance and then to board. And I think previous discussions was that the board would like to receive this directly as well. So potentially every 6 months around those updates. In relation to working collaboratively with the partners, I think as a team we're putting a lot of effort into those relationships. We've got strong bonds with our commercial providers, and at the moment on some of those we're meeting with them daily. It depends on the partner. I think there's a mixed model around some of that. And we internally, one of our governance pillars is the digital transformation leadership group, and there's an opportunity within those terms of reference to invite partners to that forward if we need a little bit more of a formal conversation around some of that. Resource implications, that is definitely an area of priority, and linking back to our paper in the closed board, one of the first resource implications will be the business case to support the single platform, and that will clearly set out the way we aim to tackle that is individual business cases for developments as we take those forward. So the single platform and our replacement of Intrepid will be the first time that you see that in detail against our 5 case. We're going to base it on the 5 case business model in that context.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the comments and feedback. I think the benefits section is so important, isn't it? And it's the answer to the case for change. So we do need to strengthen, I think, at the start of the document. So useful to remind us of that front again, the so what questions now. We do have to make sure we do start with that. So thanks for that. And thanks to Sean and the team, really, as the members have already said, for bringing this work to something that's really, really clear and that gets underneath the skin of what is digital in so many different. It's got so many different dimensions to it. I think it really helps put that out really, really clearly for us as an organisation. So I think that's really, really important because people can feel that it's a bit mysterious and sometimes a little bit sort of difficult to understand. I think this helps us all understand what we've got to do. And I'm just really interested. I just can see a real shift in the conversation nationally around this integration between workforce, digital and service redesign in a way that perhaps hasn't been there or has been a bit more forced or a bit more artificial before, where perhaps we're developing digital systems over here and we're redesigning services over there. The conversation now is much more integrated and but not coming from the digital profession, coming from conversations around the NHS leadership board. So certainly a conversation we had this week around stroke services. The clinical lead for the National Stroke Programme came to talk about that and was very much focused as well on the use of AI as part of those pathways. When we presented the critical care paper push on Tuesday, again, it's very much all about technology. How does that help? How does that help reshape the workforce? So I think it's just a really good timing. We've got this strategy now because I think that's the way that the world is looking, so I think we can make a really good contribution. So, and finally, just to say, we have got a really good mature partnership with HEIW. We just recently had a joint executive team meeting. We have those regularly just to share, make sure that we're working together where we need to work together. We're not duplicating where that wouldn't make any sense.
So just continuing that theme, I highly recommend you read Henry Kissinger's book on the potential of machine thinking. My reflection is that technology's advancement is seldom linear, and it's seldom logic. You very often jump. And my experience, for instance, in supporting work in Uganda, they didn't have landline telephones. They went straight to digital. And I just think that we are in a technologically hot environment where clinical care, planning and understanding numbers and impact will be hugely important for the planning of services as well as the delivery. So I think, Alex, you're right. This is a moment in time. And we must never forget, we are preparing people to come into a workplace in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years' time. And this needs to start early. So I thought it was a very logical read and unbelievably you could understand it. So, I'm a bit of a Luddite. The other thing, Sean, is you shared with me a YouTube of what the impact could be on a general practitioner's everyday work. And I think I'd like you to share that with all the board members, because it's not possible to think about this and imagine it. Because this is so far, what seemed so far ahead, actually, it's already with us. And we are changing, and we have to change. The big message about demand and the pressures on services is we have to change. We cannot keep doing the same things. So well done on getting this paper. I think the suggestion of putting the benefits closer to the front is a good idea. So I'm asking the board members, I'm asking you to welcome this report. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah? I think note is an understatement. I think we should welcome it. Croeso gynnes, my mor bwysig. And approve, please, the digital and data strategy.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was okay, Sean. All right.
And I just thank you for all this, but also really recognise the work of my team in getting to this point. So they've been a tremendous contributor to a huge part of this work.
The chatbot actually wrote this report.
Yeah. The chatbot wrote the questions I'm going to put to my deputy on Thursday. So yeah, I'm using AI.
Even I'm talking about chatbots these days. I can't believe it. There we are. Right. We're now moving on to agenda item 3.2, which is an update on supporting international medical graduates and ensure fair training pathways. I really welcome this report today, by the way. Push.
So thank you, Chair. The idea of this is to let the board know that what we recognise about how international medical graduates have different experiences and different attainment to those who graduate in the UK and Ireland, and also what we've done in the recent time and what we're planning to do as time goes on. So in the introduction, there's some telling, there's a telling diagram that shows the proportion of IMGs in Wales, and when you look at HEIW, 45% of their medical staff are IMGs and 10% are from the European Union, so they outnumber those who have got a primary medical qualification in the UK. Betsy is over 40% and several others are over 30%, so and we are more reliant on IMGs in Wales than any of the other home countries. I think it's really important to recognise. And with that in mind, and the data in the table on page 3,
which shows the increasing proportion of IMGs in some of the specialties like medicine, gynae, pediatrics, pathology and psychiatry, that we have an increasing duty to support those who come from overseas. Alongside the GMC, we are working with them in Wales to look at fairer training cultures and success at and what we found is that we can identify some of the people who might be at risk of differential achievement, attainment and experience. And one of those things is the recruitment process. There's a multi-specialty recruitment process, that assessment that happens for all trainees to enter national recruitment. And what we know is that those who score over 500, wherever their origin, are less likely to require support. Those who score under 480 are pretty likely to require support. In Wales, we get an increased proportion of people who score less than 480 because many of our applicants don't put Wales first. They put other, more urban places first. And as a result of that, because those who score the highest get their first choices, those who score the lowest don't tend to get their first choices, and then they end up in Wales. And we still have a duty to support them in the best way we can. The good thing is that GMC National Trainer and Trainee Survey consistently shows us as the best training team in the UK. So
can you say that again?
Consistently, the National Training Survey reveals that we have the best training in the UK as a deanery, from a deanery perspective, based on feedback from the deanery trainees. So that shows that we do give good training. Having said all that, there are some things that we think we can do even better. And alongside the UK initiatives in psychiatry and GP, we have already put extra resources into the general practice scheme, where we increase the number of educator training days. We have the Welsh, what's called now, the West programme, the Wales Enhanced Support for Trainees programme, which is aiming to put interventions in for those trainees who we think might need extensions right up front in the first 6 months, first year. And that will, we believe, and according to UK data elsewhere, is likely to reduce the risk and need for extensions at the end. The cost of extensions for last year is 1.7 million quid. It's going to be higher this year because we've got even more requiring extensions in the current year. So this is money that we're spending on extensions. We believe that putting some money up front is going to reduce that. Besides, it's the right thing to do. Is to give people the good training right at the start. It's not about saving money, it happens the same thing, I believe. So we've already done something for GPs, as I say. We now have recently introduced the fairer training pathways, and specifically applying that to some people in each of their schools that I pointed out earlier, that have a high number of international medical graduates, and having some people who support in those areas in the same way as we do for general practice. So that's been approved recently by the executive team, and we expect that to move forward. And finally, we are looking at the proposal of having a new associate dean for fairer training pathways, and that's going to come back to executive team in the future. So I think that's where I'll stop. I think this is a good piece of utilisation of existing funds to try and support our existing trainees. So I'm hoping that it will prove well worth it.
Open to questions, comments. Jill?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Trish. Once I realised this paper wasn't about super folks, then I really,
That's MRS.
yeah, I really enjoyed it, and lived the Lincoln University study with all the analysis. That's just me. I suppose what I didn't get a sense of, was really supportive of everything that's being done on this, was why some people are not achieving high SRA scores, and what's being done to sort of perhaps preempt that, and can you do interventions before they do that? Is there enough analysis of why that is, and is there consistency, I guess? And the second point, I guess, was about the selection centre. I suppose if I was being flippant, I'd say, is there any need to have a selection centre as well, or is that almost like a backstop to help those who don't get good scores?
Yeah, so the MSRA is part of the national recruitment process, and you'll always get a spread of scores like you do with any test.
Yeah.
So I think that is part and parcel of how we approach our national recruitment. So I'm not sure.
There's no themes that there, or correlations.
I think one of the things we know is that a large number of those people who do need support are IMGs, but we don't know who's going to come to us.
Okay.
Because of the selection process. So once we know, we can then start. So we do identify those once we know who's coming to us, and so anybody who's applied from overseas will automatically get a tutor. Will automatically, if they scored below 480, will be earmarked for the support up front.
Okay.
So what was the selection centre for?
Yeah, I wasn't sure the purpose of the selection centre, if the MSRA process works properly. Yeah. What was the point of the selection centre?
So I think what we've decided is that we weren't going to continue the MSRA. It was something that was introduced and focused on during COVID, but because of this work that's been done, which shows that it's useful in delineating those who need more support, we are going to continue with it. So all trainees do this for whatever they're applying for. So it's a basic knowledge type of test. So I think it's because of the information it gives us, I think we can have to continue it.
It just lifts the spirit so much to see this, finally at last, there's some sort of shape around it in the sense of movement, which is brilliant. And the idea of having a lead for a fair training pathways is excellent, and that's on track. The future appointment of a new associate dean role, I think, will demonstrate the extent of our commitment and our interest in investing in this area. So I know the issue about demonstrating the feedback is a difficult one, but I think we need to understand that as we move forward, what the value added. Two quick things. One is, this is medicine, and there must be people in other professions, and so the scope for extending this for the future is something we must look at. And the other thing I've forgotten, but those are my main points. It's just delight to see it.
On that issue about it being medicine, the majority of our postgrad responsibility is actually medicine as it stands. So that's where we have got the best data and the best information. But you're absolutely right, it does lend itself directly to other professional areas, particularly where we have to postgrad individuals. But I think there's learning here for part of our commissioning processes as well. And, I forgot to say in my introduction, this is also part of one of our requirements of the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan for HEIW specifically. So I'm pleased that it satisfies that part as well.
And the thing about not setting people up to fail, I think it'd be common sense, don't set people up to fail. Give them the maximum opportunity to succeed and to thrive. So I think morally this is such a strong thing to do. And Isa, mae'n rhaid rhywbeth, ti'n gwneud rhywbeth am hwn. You've got to.
Absolutely.
For equity's sake.
And there are systems currently in place which do support a lot of that international students.
But you know and I know that we will be looking abroad to bring more nurses, for instance, in across the United Kingdom. And we know how important their peer support is, but their academic support and coming into the country, I think it's part of the deal, isn't it?
And that's what we'd like to be doing, because as well as the academic support, it's actually how we can work with the synergies, such as the pastoral support as well, actually, when they come into this country across all professions is important too.
So can we look forward perhaps to a paper to board at some?
So international nursing is actually one of the components of the subgroups that you're developing actually the nursing workforce plan.
I also noticed that the attrition rate in nursing, right? Is there a story in there that is parallel to this?
Lots of different things.
Yeah,
So
lots of
let's take that issue away.
Can you have a look at it?
Students or qualified nurses.
Yeah. I'm talking about pre-reg now.
So currently actually that is something we are looking at. We don't have a commissioner.
Tina?
In relation to that, there's some really good work that was undertaken by Nara and Bevan.
Yes.
At Local Health Board, which has actually been looking at this for 3 years. So it'd be very good to work with some of the leads there. So pick that up. And they link up with Betsy as well.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bush, for the paper. In terms of figure 1 and figure 2, where you've got some of the data in terms of this particular program, when are we likely to see, I guess, following on from Ruth's point, when are we likely to see some outcome data?
Yeah, and so the interventions that we put in for primary care only started last year. So when they've got a 3-year program, that's when we're going to start seeing the data in 3 years. But we should get data in the meantime to know how successful people are going and whether they're satisfying the requirements of training. So in GP, it's going to be fairly quick. And because GP is so well supervised, you spot the ones that are going to need support pretty continuously. So we got a chance of making further interventions into some of those. But the GP training scheme is 3 years. So if we put the interventions in last year, we'll start getting an idea of it in 2 to 3 years' time. The other thing, though, is that's telling us that there's a problem is the increased number of people needing extensions to the training. So that's still going up. So what we want to see in the fullness of time is that coming down. And in some of the other medical training, it can be longer. But fortunately, some of the other specialties are divided into core and specialty. So advancement in core might well be something that we'll see how many people advance from the 2-year core training program to specialty training program. So that we'll get some idea of that in the other specialties too, in the same period.
Can I just make a point push in terms of this paper? We're aware the public are obviously reading these papers. I didn't know what IMG was until I got to the second page. And so we're using that and the point that Jill said. And I just, MSRA, whatever, they were alien to me. Yeah. And if we're using them, we need to explain what they are.
I did with MSRA early, but I did with IMG.
There is a point about developing the metrics. Yeah, which is, I think, a good point, and it would actually make this, really something chunky. Tina.
You mentioned about associate dean, and I just wondered whether there's an opportunity. We talked a number of times about HEIW embarking on research. I just wondered whether there's an opportunity here for maybe a postdoc to look at the qualitative information that comes forward from participants in this program, so that we can actually pick out, because they will come from different parts of the world, there'll be different professions, and the cross-fertilization of that qualitative data linked to the quantitative agenda we should be able to get a full picture out then. And I just wonder whether we could start to look at some of the postdocs that are coming out so that we can enhance some of their research capability and support that.
So we've recently introduced a new type of clinical fellow, an education fellow, which is referenced briefly in this report. And one of the 5 who we've appointed, their remit will be to look at IMG differential tables and some of the data you talked about. I think that'll start that process. So we should have some visibility here from that.
Could we actually enhance it and develop it so that we get the qualitative stuff as well against the student experience, and then link it in with the cross-professional agenda so that we actually understand the culture of what it means to them about coming to work?
Yeah, I think that will be mainly qualitative data.
Okay.
In that year. I don't think we'll have any quantitative data in that time. So, I think that will be the main part of it, but how we then make it multi-professional.
Just to strengthen that suggestion, this looks to me not like an event, but a prospective process of research, and it's a major, differential attainment has been an issue that's been hidden away, and it's unmasked and open and plain sight now, and we are doing something about it. So I think doing the proactive research or prospective research on a more formal basis would be something perhaps we could then inform the rest of the UK.
Let me find out if the GMC are already doing something like this, because a lot of this has been done in partnership with the GMC.
Yeah.
And Sarah Mosley, who's unfortunately just moved on from the Welsh GMC office to a different role, was instrumental in that. It was very important to her.
Sorry, I'm enthusiastic about this. I think you look at the GMC reports about the experience of medical training in Wales, and then in the paper it suggests that we don't get a lot of this type of medical workforce, it's second or third on the line because they go elsewhere. And I just wonder whether we could actually influence. This is the first choice.
Oh, absolutely.
If we have the qualitative data.
Yeah, that's exactly a question I was asking myself. Is that here we are, as the best training degree. Here we are putting all these interventions into place. We want people to say, I want to go to Wales because they give you this. So that's how to turn it on its head. Absolutely, I agree with you. That's a
great statement would be excellent, fantastic place to train, and they're really fair about it. Yeah, but putting that little bit behind it, they're really fair about it. That's
research.
Just a quick question, Chair, on future plans. If we look at the information on page 8 of the report, which says that 30% of the training is scored below 480, cost and GP training is approximately 50,000 for training. If we are to be ambitious about, if we are to be ambitious about ensuring that the right level of support is there to encourage people to be in Wales, to stay in Wales, to work in Wales, and that this is what we do to develop that professional standard. I'm just wondering, looking at the next financial year, are we certain we've got sufficient scope in the budget in case there's a further increase of people that might need support? Obviously, this is great work. It's fantastic to see this, but obviously accepting that the financial position generally within our health service is getting more challenging. Are we certain we can continue to build on this? Because that will be hopefully the ambition, I would suspect. But I know they're not huge sums of money, but they're still sums of money. So
the GP budget is swinging significantly, and I think we'll touch on it later with the reality report. But the reasons for extensions have been rehearsed in Welsh Government. There's lots of other factors which result in the spend. Sometimes underspend, sometimes underspend, and there's lots of other reasons why extensions are needed, which is part-time training and sickness and other things. So we've had support from Welsh Government for the GP budget in successive years. I don't know the details, but I think that we'll be within the budget even with this underspend.
Okay.
Yes, so thank you. Obviously, we had the opportunity to discuss the paper in execs as well, and we're hugely supportive of this. So it's great to hear the comments. And just from a sort of overall EDI perspective, just wanted to remind the board that we do have an all HEIW multi-professional differential attainment group, which is chaired by our dental dean. And so that actually would be able to pick up some of the things in support of push from colleagues that have been raised today. I think the other point is that the paper does talk about the race equality action plan and the specific action, and the wording there is about all commissioned programmes. So we have got a lens very much on multi-professional and a vehicle within the organisation for having those discussions and following up.
Stay on the appointment budget, so it's within the existing GP baseline, there is a level of funding for that expansion activity, so it is within, yes, the funding baseline that we have. So there's always variation in terms of what's happening in reality, but yeah, there is a level of extension assumed within that funding baseline.
Right. Well, I think, Push, we've had a good discussion, right? And for me, this is a very positive step that you're suggesting. So I'm asking the board now to note the outline approach to enhance support and promote fair training pathways for all doctors in training. Yes. Yeah? Yes. Note the alignment with an action for HEIW in the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan. Thank you for that clarity. It's not just focused on just what's in this paper. It's a much broader curve. That the proposal of a specialty school lead for fair training pathways just to note that, and that's already gone through the executive team. I think the board is fully supportive of that. And the recommendation of future appointment of a new associate dean role for fair training pathways, subject to a business case. I think we all look forward to seeing a business case that goes through the exec team and then comes as a recommendation here. I think that's a really good step. We also heard exploring this, widening it into the multi-professional. I think the board would welcome that in the future, and also explore for you as an exec team to explore the research possibilities and opportunities that I think are very clear here. I can't say it any stronger than that. Yeah. So I think we look forward to receiving a report on progress on this in the future, and that will probably go through the education committee and then through to the board, I suspect. But in general, I think this is in a really in the right place. It's got the right heart. But I would expect us to have the reputation of exceptional at training and and fairness. Okay, thank you very much. Can we now move over to agenda item 3.3, the critical care workforce report?
Diolch David. Hoffwn gyflwyno'r adroddiad hysbysu gweithwyr dyfodol ar gyfer gwasanaethau gofal critigol. Mae'n bleser fi'n gobeithio bod Emma Davies yn ymuno â ni i oedd un o'r awduron ar yr adroddiad. So, thank you, Chair. I would like to present a report informing the future workforce for critical care service, and I'm hoping that Emma Davies, one of the authors, actually on what is the thought that report, can join us. Judith, the other report author, unfortunately is doing clinical work today and is unable to join us.
Emma, are you there, Bach?
Yeah. Lovely. Diolch, Emma. So this is the final report on the work completed by Health Education Improvement Wales' workforce transformation team. Actually, and this is actually to do with the critical care is on today's agenda. The report describes the current workforce that we've got across Wales in critical care services. And as you can read as you begin the report, it is quite unsustainable. But actually also actually the report outlines actually the solutions that we've described as to what the art of the possible is and actually how we can move this forward, and has been developed in response to the challenges. Both Emma and Judith have visited every single critical care unit across Wales in order to understand how they currently work and what the opportunities have been in terms of actually taking this work forward. So the recommendations actually within actually the report, the two programs really, was about recommending solutions that can be taken forward by our health services across Wales to come up actually with better solutions in order to deliver actually improved care to our sort of patients. So the report actually has been published, but was also presented at the Tuesday Leadership Board, and that was well received as well. And that was actually acknowledged with a number of discussions points actually in there. So really actually this is about actually the critical care network now, which obviously has been instrumental in its development, taking forward some of those recommendations. And I know Judith and sort of Emma are currently actually taking this report actually and really demonstrating actually what the outcomes could potentially be across the whole of our peer networks across Wales. So it has been very well rehearsed everywhere. So I hope the report is well read, and I'm sure Poshti would actually sort of answer any questions that you about critical care services, because he's very familiar with them as well.
Okay, yeah. Open up to questions or comments. Jill? No.
Yeah, thanks for the report. And I know we had a briefing, didn't we? They came to board, and it's a great piece of work, and obviously undoubtedly necessary, because they are creaking, aren't they? I suppose in the context of that, I had a couple of points really that I just want to raise. I mean, it's exactly what's needed. It makes all the right recommendations. Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul in some ways? So shifting things around will fix one bit and perhaps weaken somewhere else. So that was my first point. And then the other was about, I suppose, the increase in the assistant practitioners, therapy technicians, the different roles. Is there any evidence that it's easier and we can recruit to those positions? Because we've heard a lot about the lower paid roles being harder to recruit to. So that felt sort of contra to the solution in a way. Whilst I can see that's the right way to go, is there any evidence that we can recruit those and train easily? And I guess I'm sure Rhiannon will have a view on the cost of all this and whether that's ever going to happen, because I don't know, on back of a 5-pack it's about 3.5 million for each critical care service, and if you multiply that out just in Wales, it's an awful lot of money. So those were my sort of points. So they sound a bit negative, but it was almost a challenge. Everything in the papers really sounds, it's a great piece of work.
I think the key piece from this report is that it's been written actually with the engagement actually of the services actually, and therefore it is their views as to whether this is achievable. That's a key issue. And in some respects, what you will see in the report is that you will have some of these different roles that are already working in critical services, but it might be actually on a 1 day a week rather than the necessary 3. So I think what we've got to remember in the midst of all this is the quality of the delivery of the services actually to patients. We've also actually looked at the other types of roles that we're actually recommending in there. And this paper has been taken to the other sort of peer networks. So in other words, taken to the therapy school, taken to healthcare scientists, and they've welcomed it because they are also seeing the opportunities that they can contribute in that critical care services. So I would say it is not actually robbing Peter's pay, it's probably utilising our current resources more effectively and efficiently and delivering that quality of services, and that is what actually everybody wants. In terms of increasing the workforce, one of the key areas that we've got to look at, and as I reminded you in terms of the nursing workforce plan and the other workforce plans that we are developing, actually part of this is actually recruiting and retaining our current workforce. And our current workforce are looking at potential opportunities. So where they are being offered additional education and training and enhancing their career, they are more than likely to stay. Because what we don't want to do is actually use them elsewhere. In addition to this report, and I forgot to add really, is that we've already commissioned those critical care training to come into Wales. So if you remember previously, we commissioned those from England and we tested them through COVID. They've been very, very successful. They've been very well received, and now we've actually commissioned them into Wales. So therefore, our own workforce are able actually to access actually those services, and they are very, very well recruited too as well. So actually that is actually quite a key issue there. So hopefully that does answer your question. I think it's a very big, in terms of, you know, yes, critical care units are quite expensive. Well, we did take this the leadership board on Tuesday. That was one of the conversations that they were discussing in terms of, and this is across the NHS really, is, you know, and that comes into how many critical care units you need. But that wasn't part of this report.
No. That's one step too far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tina, then that comes to Bush, and then Alex.
Thanks. Just ask one of my questions, because I was particularly concerned about ODPs and paramedics coming in, because paramedics are in very short supply in the ambulance service, so you partly answered that. But the issue in relation to the engagement, on page 5 of 26, it mentions concern was raised by a small number of critical care community regarding the introduction of assistant practitioners. What were those concerns and how were they addressed? The reason I'm asking that is in relation to the impact on the duty of care and quality that's coming in April. So it would be interesting to hear what those concerns and to maybe have something in the document to say how they were addressed. And my second question is it's related to the nurse consultant's role having a 50% clinical practice. It says also research. In the documentation that was introduced for nurse consultants, there's also 25% research and 25% education as part of that overarching role. And I just wondered whether we could emphasise a little bit more within the document the usefulness of the consultant role in teaching as well, and whether that would increase the requirement of resources or whether it actually would affect it at all.
Thank you, Tina. So I think the best person to answer your question about the detail about what the concerns were, Emma, can I bring you in? Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm really sorry, I've got a really croaky voice, so I do apologise. I hope you can hear me. In terms of the assistant practitioners, some of the concerns were just about how they'd be integrated into the workforce, and that they were actually from people within the critical care network who weren't clinical. The actual concerns from in clinical was we didn't really have any from our clinical colleagues, and they were excited about the opportunities to progress the band 2 into the band 3 and 4 roles and to really grow their own. So actually from our colleagues, clinical colleagues, it was really positive, the response. My internet connection cut out a little bit on the nurse consultants, but we don't currently have any critical care nurse consultants within Wales, and that's a big thing, I think, in terms of leading our workforce, and to have some of our nurse consultants to be able to be clinical, I think is something that's really important and is really needed for our workforce at the moment. So I'm sorry if I didn't answer that last bit of your question properly with my internet cut out.
Okay. Emma, I'm aware there's no consultants in critical care, but what I was asking about whether or not we could say something in the document in relation to the strategy that was launched for nurse consultants, but also for allied health professionals, which includes a 25% teaching component part, because the element of that and the effect that would have across the board, that would enhance the document, I think, and the workforce. Okay. And also maybe just to list and give us some of those concerns that they have been addressed, because otherwise the paper is suggesting that we've ignored them in preference to the people that were very positive. So we need to have a balanced response, I think. So just a couple of sentences would help that.
So the report has been published. So I think what we are doing is responding to that recommendation. But in response to your question about its advanced practice on that use of consultants, that is a piece of work that we're currently using on here in order not just such a critical care consultant. It's about actually developing that framework and setting that framework for all the advanced practice and consultants as well.
That's helpful. So the teaching component,
yeah,
because they require.
You can actually introduce that.
Yeah,
because that needs to be embedded as a standard across your consultant and advanced practice
with the postgrad certificate in education. Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
I was going to touch on the Robin Reed's faithful point. That the idea of this, some of these ideas came out of COVID, where a lot of people were deployed into intensive care from different places, and they really liked being able to do so. So I think it was in response to that that we looked at some of these roles, in addition to, I think, this paper being needed in the first place. But some of the ODPs, which are, I agree, short supply, but we're trying to do something about that from a training perspective, and the paramedics are looking for different roles. I mean, there's talk about paramedics spending 4 months in primary care, 4 months in A&E, emergency departments, and 4 months with WAST. So an extension of another option isn't actually that alien to them. So I think as a career opportunity in career development, it actually is quite attractive to those professions. As for the cost, we're already spending huge amounts of money over budget because of agency. And I would say that this is a better use of some of that money than what we're doing at the moment, and particularly with critical care, because some of those agency costs are really, really prohibitive, and it's bad practice as well. Having nurses you don't know in intensive care unit doesn't augur well for teamwork, doesn't augur well for delivery of care, and obviously has impacts on those people who aren't getting the high rates of pay in that unit. So I think there's a real issue about trying to deal with agency costs. I think the transfer coordinator, is that what it's called? The person who tries to deal with discharge. Yes. I think it's got a huge role to play, because throughput in intensive care is really important, because if you can't get patients back to the ward in a timely manner or back to a lower level of care, then you're going to end up with other cases being cancelled that want to go there, or emergencies not getting optimum treatment because they can't get out of the emergency department or the ward. So I think there's a lot of mixed cost benefits in doing something like this. I think.
John? Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, I certainly welcome the report. I echo what everybody has said, so I don't want to repeat that. Can I ask why this is the final report that's coming to board and the paper? Because the paper talks about continuing work in January through to March, which is around deploying some of these resources, implementation it talks about. So again, I would have thought we would want to see, well, what's the outcome now of this piece of work, rather than this being the final report, and then some consideration around evaluation. There's been a lot of investment in it, so I couldn't quite understand why it was final, and I'm presuming the discussion within the report around the different roles, scope of different roles, absolutely welcome all that. That's going to impact on our commissioning processes.
Yep.
And then the last point, I presume this is also going to impact on curriculum in Wales, or curricula in Wales. My concern was this is only as good as the people that are able to deliver some of the key new programs or clinical skills, etc. If we look at the paper, we're relying heavily on commissioning from England. And there's a section in the report that talks about education of educators, I think it says. How are we going to manage that? Because I know that from a university perspective, that's probably weak in terms of our ability to have competent educators in academia. Not saying clinically, but in academia.
So that's actually why we've done the partnership actually with where we've actually commissioned the programmes to come to Wales actually from England actually in the last 2 years. That's actually where we've actually developed that partnership, and some of those programmes were delivered by actually those universities in England in Wales. We are continuing to develop that partnership and to develop the educators, so we are developing those in Wales. In response to, so that is one element to interrogate. In response to your question about the final report, I think, yes, this is the report. What we didn't want is for this to be a report and sits on a shelf. So therefore, what I know Emma's actually returned back to her role actually in her previous role, but actually Judith is still with us, and what she's currently doing is actually taking this report and having that engagement actually across Wales now to say how do we move this forward. And at the end of actually, she finishes with us at the end of, because she's on secondment to us, the end of March, she will actually then produce an evaluation of actually what's that achieved and how is that going to be taken forward. But there's a critical element of health boards and a critical care network taking this particular work forward. So it's not one that's going to sit there, because the critical care network has advocated that they welcome it and they will take that forward.
Thank you, Chair.
John, Jonathan, and then Bush, and then Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just, apologies for popping out earlier. Can I just come back to the issue of the different skills mix within critical care and the potential for physician associates? I know as a board we've considered the huge work that's been done around developing physician associates, and there is reference in the report to the experience of physician associates in critical care being somewhat limited. I'm just wondering if we were to take forward, or if colleagues were to take forward one of those recommended solutions, which is PAs trained in critical care can provide that depth to the workforce. What is it that would be required to get to that point, and in what number would make a significant difference to the delivery of critical care?
Yeah, the way that PAs decide what they like to do really depends on their clinical exposure, either in their 2 years or in their first year, which is called colloquially the internship year. And as yet, the intensive care units in Wales haven't offered places for PAs to utilise, to spend time in intensive care. There's been very few of them. When the few have been there, they really are inspired by it and want to spend more time there, would like to have part of their internship there. The problem is intensive care receives trainees for intensive care, for emergency care, for anaesthetics, from medicine, and from all the allied health professions and nurses who already come there as well. So they're already at capacity from their teaching perspective. So I think there's a piece of work and a challenge to the places where you won't want PAs every unit, but some units where you say that's a goer for us. So they will have to overcome that challenge themselves to get the training process there. So I think there's some collaborative work with the health boards to what this is trying to provide is these are the options. Here you can pick and mix what's right for you. PAs, I think, if somebody feels that a tier of PAs are going to really help them, they need to do something about that with our help, of course, but they need to do something about getting their exposure and their training sorted out. So it's a joint thing with our health boards, and that's one of the things I was going to say in response to John's comments, was that the health board representatives at the leadership board earlier this week all engaged with this paper very well, realising they had a role to play, I mean. So I think that part of it is quite important. So yeah, I think there's a way to do it, but we've given the options. Yeah, it's now for those organisations to come back.
Just really quickly, Chair, if I can. I think the paper is fantastic. It's incredibly thoughtful. It's detailed. It's so sensibly set out. on that push, what I would say is that, is there a way, and it's not a detailed question, is there a way of almost piloting the expansion of this within one of the health board areas, and then we can learn from that and explain to the others the benefit of what's been achieved?
That's the problem. They're all different.
No, I get that.
And
You've got to make a case for this working. Otherwise,
Yeah.
why bother including it?
Right. Maybe there is, but Cardiff and Vale don't have these problems, for example. So you'd have to pick a hospital or a health board to do this very carefully.
And effectively, it is attitude with Julie that you're going out back into the critical aim is to discuss to what these options are. Because, as you say, the chief executive health boards are one side of that aspect. The clinicians that are within that critical aim entity is another aspect. It's about them actually really realising and taking that forward. So hopefully, actually, that engagement after the report has been published is the critical bit in terms of actually influencing how we commission going forward and how we develop those roles as well.
Alan?
Thank you. Useful conversation and some useful points being made for us to pick up on as well. And in particular, I think, thinking about, theory into practice and how best we get that, and whether there is something that we could do under more of a magnifying glass, I suppose, in one place. It's definitely worth us having another conversation about as part of the implementation process. I think the reaction from the NHS Leadership Board the other day was there was a long conversation about it, just as we've done today, because it is such an important part of the system. And obviously, after COVID, everybody really realises what an important part of the system it is and how we have to make sure we have a sustainable pipeline. And I think what the chief execs welcomed was the flexibility that this approach offers to be able to not just rely on a couple of individual professions, but to look at it in that multi-professional way. I think they really valued and supported the need to look at this in terms of what the new critical care information system also provides in terms of supporting staff and freeing up time to care, and perhaps moving away from some of what they described as some industrial supervision models that exist at the moment. And I think also recognising the point that you made, Jill, about the cost, which the big picture is much more complex, isn't it? Because investing in staff is one thing, but at the moment there is a lot of waste. So Push mentioned the agency costs, and he also mentioned the detox costs. I think the conversation earlier in the week was very much how can this expanded workforce play a role in making sure we achieve that stratification of care, so that only level 3 patients are getting level 3 care, they're not stuck there for longer than they need to be, but also that actually acute care is really good, so that people don't have to escalate up into critical care when actually their needs could be supported on the acute ward. So really seeing that sort of level 1, level 2, level 3 stratification being reinforced as a basis for this model, because otherwise it will cost a lot more. If everybody's in a level 3 bed, obviously that will cost an awful lot more. So I think that sort of financial implications very much acknowledged and recognised in the rapid conversation. So and thank you as well again to Emma, who's obviously on the call there, and Judith, who led this work. I think having that direct engagement with people at the sharp end just make sure that we have that credible project at the end of the day. So thank you very much.
Emma.
Thank you.
Now then, so Emma, I hope you and your colleague Judith have found this period of time helpful. I think you've heard quite a lot of interest and some helpful suggestions. We've got a comment I heard, which is what does completion mean? Because I've been asked to, the board is asked to note the completion of this phase of the work. Yeah, rather than of the work, because the real work now is to convert it into a living beast. And now that you've run away back into clinical land, I think it's important that this is a joint endeavour, and work with the chief execs I think is important, but actually getting in, so your colleague who's going around now, this next bit, so is the board going to receive that report? So I think, so first of all, I think we welcome and note this the completion of this phase of the work, and that the board looks forward to updating on the progress, but also how we as HEIW respond to the training and educational needs. And so that we actually do our bit to support the service as it recognises the importance of this report. Is that a fair summary of where we've got? Yeah. So really well done, Emma. Yeah. Hope you're missing us. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And we're now going on to the impact. Well, I was going to do a break just before part 4. So can you hang on for just these next 2 items, and then we'll have a break? John, if you need to. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll have a break now. Then we're going to take a 5-minute comfort break as some are in greater need than others. Yeah. We are still live, by the way. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sure everybody has appreciated that temporary break. We're now moving on to agenda item 3.4, which is the impact of the duty of quality and candour on HEIW. Push.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose is, as written, is to update the board of HEIW on how the duty of quality and candour legislation applies to HEIW. Just to remind everyone that I think it was written and designed for those organisations who have direct patient care. So it won't all directly apply word for word. We have to take bits from it that apply to us. I'm the exec lead for duty of quality, and Lisa is the exec lead for duty of candour, just so that's clear. So by way of introduction, our health minister launched the consultation a consultation on the duty of quality back in October 2022, because this is due to come into law in April 2023, and it will supersede the healthcare standards that were originally written in 2015. The paper talks about what do we mean by duty of quality. So it talks about safe, timely, effective, efficient, equitable and person-centered care. And it has 5 enablers, all of which are relevant to HEIW. Leadership, we know we've got a significant role in leadership. Culture and valuing people. Data has been mentioned on more than one occasion today, and we've got a digital strategy on the that we've heard on the agenda of today. Learning, improvement and research is what we do, is part of our basic functions, and of course we have to have a whole system perspective. So the relevance to us is that we still, as a special health authority, will have this apply to us, as I've said. The chief executive will be the ultimate responsible officer of this, but will designate, if necessary, a lead officer and a senior operational lead. Having said that, all of our board members are collectively responsible for this duty of quality. And it also includes services that we commission, so that's a really important point. Welsh ministers will also have a responsibility to demonstrate and have evidence that supports them on how they have complied with a duty of quality, and this will also therefore apply to us as NHS bodies. So all staff have a role in achieving improved service quality, and it says both clinical and non-clinical settings. So that's just a brief number of things I've picked out from the consultation document. So section 6, I'd refer you to the appendix 2, which tells us what we need to be doing by April the 1st. There are further deadlines for June, September, December, and the following year. And we had the guidance pretty recently, so this is fairly hot off the press, this paper.
What does fairly mean? 48 hours?
No, last week.
Oh.
So the original board paper bears no resemblance to this. But it shows what actions that we need to have. It's not clear to me whether we need to have a board, an independent member as a lead for quality. I couldn't find that in there.
We're each and severally responsible.
Sorry?
But you've just said we're each and severally.
Yeah. Well, or I mean, having a lead IM for it isn't clear in the paper for quality and conduct. So I'm the exec lead for duty quality, as I said, and Lisa is for duty conduct. The appendix 2 is only about quality, so it gives us the things that we think we're doing well, things that we need to reinforce, and things that we need to commit to. So I'll leave that as it is. So There is a section also on what quality activity is currently happening in HEIW. There's a number of areas that we see in ECQC with postgrad clinical training updates. We're talking already and developing a quality management hub for HEIW. We already have a good role in quality improvement training, and we're developing the evaluation, research, innovation and improvement side of our work as well. And that's, as you've heard before, is Derek. There are the other elements that I've said before: leadership function, digital, Welsh Language Act is also quite important. Gosh, yeah, they've read the paper. Okay, sorry, I was just trying to pull out the things. So the expectation is that Welsh Government expect this to take a number of years to embed completely. Then they know that new structures and processes across the Welsh NHS need to be established and embedded. So that's where it started, where it's expected to go to, and where we are. What you would mention to Canada separately.
I think as you would have written in the paper release that you got to see Canada's and other describes is probably unlikely to actually affect us because it's mainly actually related to patient care. However, we could be involved in a duty of conduct, the investigation or through what you help board because of our strategy. And it's important we recognise that we've got a responsibility to ensure all our Commission education programs and chief obviously understand that this duty is coming in and therefore our students are aware as well. So I just have a question.
So this paper then, is this a holding paper ahead of us actually having a more in-depth look at it by the March board? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that the penny has just dropped for me is in terms of quality of education and training. We rely very much on the work and interface with the universities. Is there a duty of quality and candour enforceable through this mechanism on them, or is it entirely through our commissioning? Therefore, there's a big impact on this to ensure that our commissioning prowess is strong enough and reflects the aspiration. This is a cultural thing. The other thing, Alex, is this is a culture of being open and honest, yeah, and facing up, and that's integral to our leadership programs and the way that we work within the organization. So this is almost paralleling the compassionate leadership agenda, which is the other penny that's dropped. And if you take SAFE, it's almost the mnemonic that we need to be looking at in terms of 360ing our commissioning. So I think there's a way to go in this, which is on the face of it, it's about patient care, and we don't seem to be directly, but indirectly, we can affect the ability for people to act appropriately in whatever clinical situation that they end up working in. So I think we have a very powerful and understated role in potentially. I don't know whether people agree or disagree with that, but I think there's more to this. So I think having a proper discussion about this and seeing how you work through it as an exec team, I think is really important.
Maybe bring it back to board development in February.
Yeah, or a special session. You know, it might be something that there'll be people with experience here who, having read it and seen where we're getting to, would want to have a proper input, seeing that we each and severally around this table responsible for it. I think we really welcome this, though, don't we, as a board? So I've sort of cut to the chase with it a bit, seeing that it's likely to need it.
I agree with all that, and it's really good to have the guidance class and coming back to it after it's had time to digest a bit will be helpful. I'm just very pleased to see within it a reference to evaluation and research. And it just seems to me that this is absolutely at the heart of this, because without that, we haven't got the tools to demonstrate or justify what we're doing in any which way. And so if we do come back to this, I would hope that we might be able to feature a bit of a discussion about what we're doing around evaluation and research. And, if it's not suitable in March, maybe in some later time in the summer, maybe June, I don't know, would be a time when would be done by the executive. But I think that it's important that it has its own place, as well as being incorporated within the quality programme, because otherwise it gets lost.
John? Just in relation to Ruth's point, I suppose taking it a step further in terms of how we as an organisation respond to this and ensure that we're doing what we need to do. It is a wider point, Chair, and that is in relation to new duties generally, because in April of this year, of course, HEIW falls within the jurisdiction of the Future Generations Commissioner as a new body under the Act. Obviously, we take into account the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and all the reporting and the work that's done. So the organisation has become ingrained bit by bit by bit in the principles of the Act, but we will be officially captured by the duties of the Act, and there will be a whole series of things that will fall from that. So and that's from April. So I just think it was advice from me with this. I sit on the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee of the Future Generations Commissioner currently. But obviously, there may well be more work for us to do as an organisation.
Thank you, John. That's an important point. So, does anybody else want to come in now? Can I just look at the board's been asked to note the draft expectations from Welsh Government and timelines. I think we note it and welcome it. Note the creation of an internal steering group to implement the duties of quality and candour. Yes. Can I ask your support on that? Mm-hmm. And then support the need for, I think, further discussion and an update. Yeah. And I think the board members are keen to be involved in you know, the independent members would be keen to support the executive team in developing this together. And I think we should explore, as Jonathan has just said, that we need to ensure that we actually explore when we have new duties put on us. We need to explore the implications, because we're so different to the average health body. Have I said that right? Yes. We're so different in some ways. And it could appear that we're a bit remote from it, but actually we may be closer than we assume. So being named is being named. Yeah. Okay. Is that about right? Yeah. Right. You happy with those recommendations? Yeah. Thank you very much. I've got to say this right now. 3.5 Introduction to Genomics.
I'm not going to expand on the paper that you've got in front of you. It's been brought here today because really it's an addition to our IMTP work this year. It wasn't something that we'd anticipated at the start of the year, but something that we were asked to get involved in by the Genomics Partnership Board that is chaired by Suzanne Rankin, as Chief Executive Cardiff, and also because of the development of the All Wales Genomic Delivery Plan as well. And obviously there's a section in their workforce and they wanted our input to that. So most of the work for us is really coming into next year. So you'll see that in next year's IMTP. We have obviously been looking at some of the genomics education in the course of this year. And since we wrote the paper, we've actually been successful in identifying a clinical lead to come in and work with us from a genomics background for 3 to 4 sessions a week, who can really help us shape this agenda now going forward, and make sure that we're on the right track and solidify the links with HE, because HE got huge amount of resource on genomics. We don't want to be going trying to duplicate and replicate that, but we do need to be tied into them. So we had a bit of a session, didn't we, at the staff conference in December on genomics. So I know you all know about genomics now, and you're all experts. So
I was going to say,
leave it there.
Did everybody attend that session? No.
I think it's a recording of it, isn't it?
Is there recording?
Yeah, I think so.
It was a very simple, up to, right high up, as well as a little bit of detail, overview of genomics. Can we check that it is available, and can we share it particularly with the independent members? Yeah. And if not, could we have a briefing session on just a briefing on genomics, so that we're all sort of able to discuss this properly?
Yeah, I think that realistically that'll be going into next year now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's the Christmas staff forum.
It was a Christmas staff.
Yeah,
It was
I racked my brains.
It was the clinician who was working out of his clinic in Swansea, who was a Cardiff clinician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So happy to take any questions on that, but other than that, it was here for information really.
Okay, so we're asked to note the launch of the genomics delivery plan for the NHS in Wales, and the requirement for HEIW to work in partnership with the Genomics Partnership. Note the UK-wide arrangements that underpin the UK genome strategy, and note the initial work to develop specific educational resources within Wales to support the emerging requirements. I ask you to note.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item, we're going on to governance and performance now. Agenda item 4.1, review of education and training activity 22-23. Who's leading?
Thank you, Jay. I'm going to start, and I'm sure my colleagues from Cross will want to come in as well. First of all, I need to make an apology. There is a mistake in the papers. So the figures of 185 to 248 million is spend, not funding. So it's quite a key point, but that is actually spend. So it's on the front and then repeated on page 3.
So is the syntax right? Is it saying that the spend is increasing? Or the funding? It says funding increasing. Are you saying spend is increasing?
Yeah, so those figures aren't funding, they are spent.
So that funding word is spending?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the spend on education and training within HEIW since we were established from 1920 has increased by 34% to our forecast for this financial year, and that's set out in figure 1 with the different areas of commissioning included. Just to draw out, we have had an exceptionally challenging year in 22-23. Our fill rate percentage has historically been around 98.5% for healthcare professional courses. This has dropped to circa 94% in September 22, and an increased impact on the spring cohort that has traditionally been difficult to recruit to, but we've seen sort of that difficulty increasing in this financial year. We're not alone in this. I think it is also reported by Health Education England that they're having challenges in filling their courses as well, and that a difficulty in recruiting to those student numbers are beginning to emerge. And the reasons, I suppose, reported by HE for the decrease in applications being that sort of negative media coverage and the erosion of attractiveness of bursary packages and cost of living issues. So commissioning arrangements in some of the other home nations are quite difficult. So that detailed benchmarking is an exercise that we'd like to be able to undertake, but I think through the intelligence that we're able to gather, everybody is experiencing sort of a similar environment at the moment. But that sort of fill rate issue impacts on our ability to actually, I guess, spend the allocation that is given to us by Welsh Government. We've also got an increasing level of attrition. It's higher than we have budgeted for, but again, it compares relatively well to other parts of the UK nations, with HEE reporting I suppose in excess of 20% of their attrition figures, and ours are sort of less than that, but have deteriorated and are more than we've budgeted for, sort of giving additional underspent. So bursary take-up is another area where we notice sort of some significant variation. There are two elements to that. The bursary is means tested. It hasn't been keeping pace with cost of living increases, so the average bursary rate has been falling. We've also noticed that I guess more students are choosing a student loan route instead of taking the bursary, although the vast majority of our students still take that bursary package. We've had some delays in course start dates. We've described that in previous reports, but at Swansea and Bangor, particularly associated with dispersed and distance learning. So yeah, those delays have caused I suppose issues in terms of our ability to get people onto those courses and spend the money allocated to us. General practice and dental, I think we've described the challenges of recruiting into those dental places previously. And for general practice, the model is predicated on half of the trainees going to secondary care and half going to primary care as their first sort of place of training. We've seen a bit of a shift in the numbers where more have gone into secondary care than primary care than we predicted in the model, and that generates an underspend in the money that we are sending across to primary care. The other side of that, in secondary care, we fund the places rather than the trainees, so that resource is committed and spent regardless of that shift, I suppose. So on page 10, we're obviously undertaking an awful lot of work to try to resolve this position. I think, as Alex said in the Chief Exec's report, what we've done previously may not continue to work, so we need to look at different things. So Lisa, did you want to pick up anything that's on?
So where you've got here 2.3 there is realising that this is happening, and the cost of living actually is something that we've articulated in a number of arenas actually when this became actually evident. The bursary issue, as we know, we've discussed that previously, and there is a programme of work actually being led by Welsh Government on looking into that, and that is still ongoing. But actually what you've actually got detailed actually in 2.3 is the initiatives that are already underway in working with partners actually from universities and health boards to explore how we can improve actually the uptake to the applications going forward. There's a lot of good work that does happen from universities actually recruiting actually to programmes, but we're obviously actually saying actually what else can we do to actually enhance that? And as well as that is looking at where we've actually got people actually coming into our programmes, but actually looking a bit further down actually with further education colleagues to understand how we can prepare people better in order to access and get onto our programmes quicker as well. But it's also actually looking at that, and it's quite encouraging that as far as our healthcare support workforce, we are going to be quadrupling actually how many actually have been able to access that actually in the future as well. So there's a lot of good work actually going on actually, but it is actually taking time to sort of see actually the outcome of all those, because it's initiatives that we are putting in now, looking to hopefully increase the spring cohort, which is imminent, and then obviously really preparing for the September intakes actually into our application processes as well. But also looking at those on the courses, and as you mentioned, the attrition rates, actually understanding the whys and the wherefores of that, and how we can prevent that actually happening going forward. Any questions?
So we've got the paper, we've had some explanation. Are there any questions or observations people want to make? John?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the paper, Rhiannon, and support the explanation for me. It's quite clear. I understand some of the factors behind it. I guess our duty as a board is, now that we've recognised what these factors are, that presents us with a risk that we would be in a position next year of underspend again. So I welcome, Alex, what you said at the start in terms of your report and what Lisa has reiterated. Perhaps what would be useful for board, and it's just a suggestion, that there is that risk that we'll be having this conversation next year again in terms of underspend, and aware of the factors of those underspend. I wonder to what extent it would be helpful for us to have a paper or included within the risk register of what we are doing, what mitigations we are putting in place in order to try and placate that risk for next year, aware of what causes the problem in terms of the underspend. At least then we're demonstrating our accountability as a board to say, well, we've done this, we've done that, these are our mitigations, this is what we expect, this is when we expect it. And I think the point to note would be that we would not be fully in control of that risk because we've got to work with partners, but that we would influence that as where we can. I think that would be helpful for us as a board, but I think it would be also helpful for us to be demonstrating externally how we're actually taking this risk to us as an organisation seriously, and this is what we're doing, and we're making that explicit. So.
Thank you, John. Is that it's good to identify it as the risk, but what it really is the opportunity. So this is an opportunity to build the workforce for the future. And I think that the balance in identifying it as the risk, the benefit of dealing with the risk is that we maximize the opportunity that we've got to use the funding. I think it's both sides of the same scales. Jill? And Tina?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll be brief because I'm conscious of time. And thanks, Rhiannon, for the paper. I think for the first time, I feel as though we've started to get some of the performance and finance data there that gives the board a really good platform, I think, to start thinking, as John says, about, well, so what do we do about it? So that we don't end up in this position next year. In terms of the risk, I just wanted to, I know I've talked about it before, but our risk appetite on this in terms of taking a punt on overfill on some of the courses, and I really think we need to come back to that. If we're aiming for 100% each time, we're always going to end up lower. So I think we need to think about whether our risk appetite is for 105% on the basis that we could overspend on some courses. So I'll just leave that there. 2 quick points then. Spend by 34% puts a different perspective on it, doesn't it? Because it could just have cost us more. We could be training less. So I think that we need to be careful with those figures. If it's just about spend, because funding implies that we've got more places. Spend could just be more expensive but less places. So let's just be careful there, because if we can give some of this stuff to the minister, we need to be very careful that she's got the the context right. So the universities could just be charging us more. And the last point, I suppose, is, and I found it a bit hard to understand why we couldn't get the figures from the other home nations. I mean, it just seems to me, have they not got good data? Is that
it's a different way of coding those figures. So we commission at GI Education, so we've got very sort of a good relationship with our universities in terms of actually what we are delivering and what we are commissioning. Obviously, some of the other home nations don't commission. So they depend actually on another body to what our bill rate is. So we were very mindful of not being able to actually measure up these numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
just coming back on the sorry.
No, I was going to check.
Coming back on the cost point, so I suppose figure 3 is the increase in numbers. That's not spend. So I guess we've looked at both sides of that. So the new commissioning contract has a slight increase in the overall cost, but it wouldn't
it's not to the extent that costs are just going up and the numbers aren't.
No, it's just making sure
Yeah.
that somebody doesn't try and rubbish it.
Sorry, actually the point is, we need to start with the education and training. That's the most important thing that we're increasing, is the education and training, and then that has a cost, rather than start with the cost or the spend or the funding, and work backwards, so it's just getting that in the right order.
I got Tina first. Tina, and then
Thanks, I found this paper really useful, and also Fig 5 shows pre-registration commissioning under place. It'd be helpful to look at that across the board for some of the allied health professions, so that we can actually get a full view of what our commissions are, because you talk about attrition rates. I think the other issue here is that in the board action, we commented on, from the last board paper, looking at attrition in terms of people who leave at the end of year 1 and year 2. So that they leave with a certificate or a diploma, and whether they could be employed. That is stuff that we're trying to progress. So when we're looking at this, I think the education ECQC will be looking at a variety of challenges and maybe looking to see whether we can offer those potential opportunities to work within health and social care. And I guess the other thing is the impact of strike action and negative media, if pay awards aren't done, doesn't feature anywhere in this, yet it is a big issue in terms of public perception and how people come.
I played it into my chair's report.
You did, but I think it needs to be reflected within here of, no, let me finish if I can, in relation to, this is not just an HEIW agenda, this is a wider agenda with regards to the 4 nations, and actually maybe looking at, when you said the comparisons between Scotland and Northern Ireland had strike action before, and it'd be helpful to look at the impact, if we could get those figures from them, of the strike action 3 years ago, and whether the impact on that brought people in. So if there is a trend analysis with that, that gives you an evidence base of where it was the first track of action there, so we can take it from that.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me finish my point.
Oh, no, I get it now.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, again, like everybody else, if I can just welcome the report. It is really useful, and I think the important and the positive is it shows the level of ambition of what we're trying to achieve. One of the, I think, it's going back to Tina's reference of figure 5 on the pre-reg nursing commissions versus the funded places. When you look at the graph, whilst we know that this last year has been particularly challenging for us in terms of fill rate and concerns around attrition, that gap between what we wanted to bring into the system and what we brought in is actually widened considerably over the last 3 to 4 years. So this isn't just a 1-year challenge for us. This has happened bit by bit by bit as we've gone through the last couple of years, and that graph shows that. What I'm interested in seeing, I'm not sure if it's possible to map it against figure 5, but it does go back to the attrition rate. Could we, in each of those years, map the attrition rate against what we wanted to spend, or what we wanted to commission and bring in, and what we brought in by number of those completing their courses? Because I would imagine as we go through the last 2 years, we'll see that attrition rate getting more difficult and therefore having a greater impact. I think it will just help to explain why we've ended up in the position that we're currently in. Now, I'm assuming that the student number that's indicated by the orange line, that's the number of students who've completed their course and qualified. Yeah? No?
The starters.
They're starters, so they're not finishers.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to pick up. We need to look at that.
Because that's what we need to map as well. Because then we need to know what that gap looks like.
Yeah.
So that's why the attrition rate and right, okay, fine.
But your point is well made, and I think that's why we are looking into attrition, to the causation. And Tina and I have had the conversation about if you actually leave at year 1, year 2, or when do you leave? What are the points where they actually leave?
I think that's a valid point. I think our concentration should be on attrition and fill rates rather than the extent to which we commission. because at the moment we're not filling the commission places. So the effort must be not so much on saying, well, you know, like Jill suggested, perhaps over commissioning, because we're not meeting where we are at the moment. So if we look at more effort around pipeline, feeder programs, getting people fit to get into the programs, so that we impact on fill rates, then we should see that gap coming together.
And first destination, because then it tells you exactly where, we said this on the Education Commission, the first destination of everything we commissioned will give us whether we're meeting the INTP.
So I think understatement is that this paper has been very useful and very welcome. Yeah. In terms of what the board is formally asked to do is to note the recent trends in education and training, training activity, and also note the actions in progress to improve the position for subsequent academic cycles. I think the board also encourages activity to be focused in that area at a different level this year with partners. Note that this has resulted in exceptional in-year underspend, and that's a complex which I think this paper informs, and support the repatriation of additional funding to Welsh Government as detailed in the finance paper that is also on the agenda. Can I ask you to approve that, please? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think this paper is the start of it. We've heard some of the discussion about widening it to look at detail of finishers, and particularly those people who don't complete. And what are the opportunities for them to have, for the system to gain from them having something to show for whatever level of education and training they've achieved. So well done, thank you. And do you want to go on to your finance report for month 9 now, please?
As you said in the report, so the month 9 reported position to Welsh Government was an underspend of 691,000, but that is against an amended resource plan that has already taken into account the agreed handback of what is currently 14.5, and as set out in the tables, what we're trying to do is give the detail of the year-to-date position against our existing budgets, but also show you more detail about how the initial resource plan was established through the agreed resource plan that we brought through the board earlier in the year, and then all of the changes that have been made to the budget that we're now working against as at month 9, and that is set out on page 5. So that allocation process with Welsh Government is quite a live relationship. So to give us a pay award or for us to hand something back, that's how we're sort of enacting those changes. So that table is in one of the appendices, but it's quite difficult to access. So happy to sort of bring that into the report and continue to show you that. But I suppose having run our month 9 close and made an assessment of where we are and what our forecast is to the end of the year without any sort of further action, we're still looking at a sort of 7 million underspend. 2 million of that is funding that we earmarked as potential support for students because of cost of living issues. We haven't had a policy decision on that from Welsh Government, so we've released that into the position. We were also quite fortunate that we negotiated with Welsh Government funding for our pharmacy undergraduate placement programme and the primary care academies, and that is in our baseline. But currently we will be spending that in future years, but there's been some delay in this sort of financial year, so that is releasing 1.7 million. The other factors are, I suppose, once we've handed back big amounts of commissioning budgets, then to achieve break even, we're getting more into the sort of the pay and non-pay areas, but there's slightly more in that commissioning budget as well. So our recommendation at this point is we sort of agree another handback of 6.7, which takes us down to around 300,000. We're obviously tracking and managing every possible variable at this point in time. We've got to submit an accountable officer letter to Welsh Government by the end of February, so we will have another month
But I suppose having looked at everything at the moment, there is nothing else of this scale that should cause us an issue in the run into New Year. There could still be, hundreds of thousands moving, but we think we're able to manage that within what we have to do for year end. I'll stop there.
Any questions? I think it's very clear. So the board asked to note the underspent financial position reported for HEIW at month 9. Note the actions progressed to be in balance at year end, being a return of 14.5 million to Welsh Government. Agree the recommendation to hand back an additional 6.7 million in this financial year in the context of the review of education and training activity contained in the previous report. Note the summarised explanation of the key variations by directorate. Note the capital allocation and spend to date. Note the balance sheet position. Okay, everybody content?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now move on to agenda item. Just need to turn my page. 4.3, a iaith Cymraeg.
I'm not presenting the 5th and last, I'll give you a chance to diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly...
Coming through there. It's coming through there. Okay. Yep.
Felly, papur
for the board, which just shows work done on the Welsh language. The paper is specifically talks about the progress in the following areas: translation, work to do in compliance with the language plan, and the work done on more than just words. The paper reflects the dual role that we have of doing things internally, but also the stuff we do nationally and externally. The NHS throughout Wales, in terms of the translation work, it's good to say that significant work is still going on. We're still doing about 4.5 million words a year, and this reflects that there's a strong awareness amongst our staff of the needs of compliance, and so therefore getting stuff translated. Good work continues to be done. The Welsh language officer of the team in terms of raising awareness of the Welsh language plan around the organisation. The emphasis on gaining hearts and minds. We want to avoid making it dry and bureaucratic.
O ran y gwaith mwy na geiriau,
work on more than just words.
We reported
in the last board meeting in terms of the new 5-year more than just words plan. It's good to say we've set up an internal workforce, and that internal workforce meets regularly. We'll be reporting back in the next few months about the work that's been achieved there. So therefore to close, it's a paper to note for information. I'm happy to take any questions.
So are there any questions for David? No? And we're asked to note the report for information. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4.4 is our corporate risk register, very important document. I can't see it though. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Okay, diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly, adroddiad I nodi hon, ac yn ymwneud â'r cofrestr risg corfforaethol, mae 'na 12 risg ar gyfrestr. Un coch yn ymwneud gyda seiclediolwg, 8 risg melyn neu amber, a 3 gwyrdd. O ran newidiadau i'r cofrestr ers Tachwedd, mae 'na 2 nodi. Un ydy risg 12,
is risk 12.
meddygol teulu,
Costs of
a llall ydy
training
risg 6,
medical GPs, cymeradwyr cynllun addysg a profiad. Mae'r ddau risg yma wedi gostwng
decreased.
wyrdd
They're
bellach
now assessed as green.
a rheswm hynny
The reason for
wrth
this
bellach
is
wedi
because Welsh
cadarnhau
Government has now confirmed
ariannu ac
that they
cymeradwyr
will
cynllun
support
ac hyfforddiant.
our training plan.
Papur i'w
So
nodi
therefore,
yn
this is
ystod
just a paper to note, please.
Yeah. Any questions or comments to make on this? John?
Yes, for some clarification with regard to the first risk, which is red. It would be helpful to have an indication of timelines when or if this is going to go to amber. That's my first question. And the second one relates to risk. What's the number? Reference one. Anyways, the one in relation to workforce data from other NHS organisations and workforce that HEIW are not able to access that data. That's the risk. And yet the progress says that we've got access to it. So I don't know why it's a risk.
Both of them. Yeah. So in relation to the red risk, it is red and likely to remain red for the foreseeable future, and that's as a result of the outward risk of nefarious actors across the globe around the risk. So we will continuously strive to improve our posture, our resilience, our ability to respond to cyber, but the threat outside, no matter how good we are, we're always that one click away from us. So we can do the best vision exercises. So it's actually the external risk we're measuring as red and demonstrating that we do have a program. There's paper coming to audit committee on next year's plan around that. So we will always try and make sure that we've got as resilient as possible. But the risk itself is a red risk and a real risk. And learning from the Irish attack most recently, I think all hospitals I know have that as a red risk. But we will continue to update audit committee on the paper, on the progress we're making to always try and mitigate that as much as possible. But the position internationally is cyber is probably red. On data and workforce information, we are this year and into next year making considerable efforts to improve it. So we've had some of the data, but we still have gaps. And we are currently analysing where those data gaps are and what they look like. So it's not a full complement of everything we'd want, but we are making progress and improving the availability of data. So for instance, the information maybe on the vacancy position across NHS Wales is still an area that we would like to progress and improve our availability of that information. But we've got that very firmly in our IMTP for next year.
We probably need to make that clear with that.
Okay.
And if that's the case, the risk says that it's static, but it's not static, it's improving.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, sorry. Can I ask a strange question, perhaps? And I don't think it should be reported in open because it could make us vulnerable. But it's not the cyber attack risk that concerns me. It's the resilience capability. So if the cyber attack is a constant high red, and given the newspapers today about the way Iran and Russia are working, those are just, that's at a level it could impact any organization. It's about how good would our resilience be if we were in our systems, which are business continuity essential. How much of a mess would it make, and how big an impact would it make? I'm asking that question from the view of what happened with 111. So for me, is there a way of assessing resilienceness? That's the wrong word, but do you know what I mean? Yeah, rather than we accept that, seeing that there's a red risk all the time and knowing that you can cranking it up all the time. Yeah. What about the resilience? Even though you crank it up, if it were to go wrong, what's our resilience like?
Okay. Gonna be careful how I answer it because it's being recorded.
Yeah, well,
but
you don't have to answer it. You can just say you'll pick it up with me outside the meeting.
But I want to give you assurance that we're doing everything that is possible. But the framework in which we're operating on, to answer that question, is the cyber assessment framework that's been set out by the Welsh Government, and the detail can be presented through that.
I did question the validity of this, whether I was losing my head actually asking that question in an open discussion. Okay, thank you very much. Where are we going now? In committee decisions, David?
Papur mae'n adlod penderfyniadau in committee meeting, the board meeting in November. We have to do this in terms of reference, and therefore this is just a paper to note, please.
To note those paper, please. Agenda item 4.6, and this is the Education Commissioning and Quality Committee held on the 6th of December. Tina, do you wish to say anything against the paper?
Quick points, if I may, say that it's already been mentioned that the GMC National Training Service response rates in Wales are the highest in the UK in respect to both trainees and trainers. And I think that's significant, and also that the committee welcomed a pass rate of 96.4% of the foundation training pharmacists, which was confirmed as the highest rate in the United Kingdom as well. So I think those are two really areas very positive in relation to preparation for the future workforce, and indeed in respect of the nursing and other health professional education training programme update, the quality performance framework and the rollout of contract quality phase 2 are going ahead in implementation, and that the committee welcomed a reference within the report to the national campaign to address school rates, which we've already been discussing earlier on in the meeting.
Thank you, Tina. Can I ask you to note that report then, please? So we now come to the end of the meeting. We're actually finishing 37 minutes over, considering that we lost 20 minutes to technology. And I thank you very much for your help and support in getting through this agenda today. I'd just like to reflect one thing, Alex, this tremendous amount of work that's been culminated in coming today to this agenda, and clearly as independent members we recognise there's been some real quality in the papers and in what we've been given. Thank you very much. This makes it easier to be assured. So thank you very much, everybody. We're due to have a board development session on the 16th of February, again here, and I look forward to welcoming people to the board meeting, open board meeting on the 30th of March, here again, and at HEIW. Diolch yn fawr.